everyone. Pull up a chair and get comfy.
Oh, girl, have we got stories to tell you all?
The Never Alone podcast is about to begin, and you don't want to miss a minute.
Hi, and welcome back to our Never Alone podcast. I'm Iris Fisher-Smith, your host, and I have with me tonight my friend Rachel Durham. She's back with us to talk about a new topic that I'm not sure we've talked about before. We might have mentioned it, but what we're going to be talking about tonight is celiac disease. And the reason we're talking about it is it seems to be more and more common these days than it used to be. And Rachel has it and I have it. And that's actually how we met almost 11 years ago. So we've had quite a history together and a, time of sharing with this lovely thing, this disease. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what celiac disease is. And Rachel, if you could, start us off by talking about it a little bit. What is celiac disease specifically? Do you remember the specifics about how you would describe it?
Yeah, so celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder where your body, when you eat gluten, which is a protein that's found in wheat, oats, rye, and barley, when you eat that particular protein, your body reacts to it as if it was some kind of enemy. Like if you had a cold virus get into your system, your immune system would attack the cold virus to try to keep it from making you more sick. So
Right.
Your body thinks that gluten is something that it needs to attack, when in truth it's food. Theoretically, your body shouldn't be attacking food. But for whatever reason, just a lot more people are struggling with this, where our immune systems are attacking things that should not be considered an enemy to our body. So.
Yeah. What do you attribute that to? Why do you suppose it's more common today than it used to be? Or maybe it's been around always, but nobody maybe knew that it was a problem.
Yeah, I've wondered about that too. Kind of like with other things, where is it that it's happening more, or is it just that we were diagnosing it more? I mean, I know a lot of people that I've talked to who have food issues attribute it to, chemicals in our food and just the kind of unnatural nature of the food that we eat.
Yeah.
Because I know I've heard from quite a few people that when Americans with celiac disease travel to Europe, they're able to eat like pasta in Italy, but we can't eat American pasta. So I think there might be something too, that the food supply that we have is maybe just hard on our bodies, or maybe our bodies are just overwhelmed with environmental factors. Our immune systems can get bogged down with so many chemicals and things in our environment that maybe I feel like my immune system is just reactive to a lot of things.
Right.
So,
I don't know. Yeah. Once you start with one autoimmune thing, if I could back up myself here a little bit, when I discovered that I had celiac disease, it was in the late 1990s. Although I struggled with the, disease for many, many years, but nobody knew what it was. And so I had all these stomach problems. I would break out in psoriasis and rashes and all kinds of things. And then nobody knew what the heck it was from. Because I had a burst appendix when I was young, and I had so many digestive issues, the doctors assumed that it was related to that, because mine was quite extreme, where the appendix had burst and it had spread, and I had tubes in my stomach for a long time. I've talked about this in other segments. So they didn't know to look for celiac disease in the 80s and 90s. And so once they diagnosed me, they felt it was kind of rare, and I almost felt like I was a trendsetter, because I got diagnosed with celiac disease, and then all of a sudden it became pretty well known. And then a lot of people were getting diagnosed with it, over a period of like 10 or more years, from the time I got diagnosed. And what they told me was that it's very common, as they were trying to figure out my situation, that when celiac disease goes undiagnosed way too long, what happens is it leads to other autoimmune diseases. In my case, I ended up with Sjogren's disease, which is a disease that affects your eyes and your mouth and makes things very, very dry. And another autoimmune disease. And because that's what celiac disease does, do damage if you don't treat it. And the way that you mainly treat it, in the beginning especially, is through diet and avoidance of wheat. The second disease I ended up with over a period of time was a thyroid disease called Hashimoto's disease, another disease where the body attacks the thyroid. The immune system in your body attacks the thyroid, and you end up with, a situation where your thyroid is actually shrinking. And so you need medication for that. So now you've got this three-way autoimmune nightmare. And I'll tell you what, it took them a long time to figure out what was what. And I was very, very sick. And nowadays they know to look for it. So it doesn't tend to get that extreme in people like it used to. But there's also this other thing that is, like a gluten allergy. Okay, so that is something, from what I understand, it's not the people that are allergic to it. It's the way the wheat is processed and produced and sprayed with chemicals, making people very, very sensitive. As you said, in Italy, you can go and eat the pasta there and the wheat, and you're not going to react to it like you would here. So now you have two things going on. You have someone who is allergic to the pesticides and the wheat, and, that's not as extreme as the celiac disease. When they diagnosed me, they called it celiac sprue, and it was considered a hereditary disease, which it is. It tends to run in Irish and Italian families, correct? Remember that? And I have Italian on one side of my family, and you have Irish and Italian. I'm trying to remember. What was that? What did you tell?
Yes. Yes. Plenty of Irish. And then my maternal grandmother was from Sicily. So she was full Sicilian.
Yeah.
And then her husband, my maternal grandfather, was Irish and Portuguese.
Uh-huh.
So yes, very Irish, very Italian.
Right. So
Yeah.
they say it's hereditary, and you're usually born with it. That's with the celiac sprue. And so how has it affected you, Rachel?
Well, for me, it's interesting when I look back, like you were talking about, you had the celiac a long time before it was diagnosed. So if I was going to look at how it's affected me over a lifetime, I would say probably I had it genetically. I had a failure to thrive as an infant that was never explained, and then I obviously came through that. And then when I was 11 years old, I developed arthritis, junior rheumatoid arthritis. And when I look back, I think it very well could have just been from undiagnosed celiac, because I remember as a kid, certain meals, I would get very sick to my stomach. A lot of kids would like to have donuts for breakfast or pancakes, but I loved the taste of them, of course, as a child. But then I remember, as I got older, I was like, I don't want donuts. What kid doesn't want donuts? you know, but I just couldn't handle it. So I kind of think I probably had celiac from the beginning, but just never knew about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was in my 20s, my arthritis became very crippling. And so I was pregnant and nursing at the time it came back. I had gone into remission for a few years while I had my first 3 children. So between my third and fourth child, it came back with a vengeance, is what I say, because it was bad as a kid, but this was a whole new level. I was literally in a wheelchair. I couldn't go. I had 3 toddlers, mind you, and one on the way. And if we were going to go somewhere where I would have to be on my feet, like to the store, I would have to use a wheelchair or the cart. And then around the house, when my husband was away at engineering school, I had to use crutches around the house. And during that time, I was on prednisone for 2 years. And so I think there might be something to this leaky gut idea, like when I was thinking about your appendicitis too. Maybe there's a connection there with leaky gut. But I think the prednisone and the medications that I was on while I was pregnant and nursing might have, because most people don't take prednisone for 2 years straight. It's not really recommended. It's usually supposed to be a short-term treatment for things, but it was the only medication they said was safe while I was pregnant. So anyway, after that period of time of being on prednisone for 2 years is when I started getting really sick from food. And it got worse and worse over a couple of years. And by the time I finally admitted to myself that I actually needed to go see a doctor for my stomach problems, because I was used to seeing doctors for my arthritis issues, was when I realized I would get so sick after I ate. It felt so terrible. I always say it felt like I swallowed a bag of cement. I could not digest food.
Yes.
And like I digested it and it went through, but I just I felt so sick. Like I just, like nothing was working.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would actually go for 2 or 3 days at a time eating nothing. And it was because I was afraid to eat because it hurt so much. When I would eat, I would get so sick and I couldn't eat. Like I literally was like, I can't eat anything.
Yeah.
So when that started happening on a regular basis where I couldn't eat for days at a time, that's when I finally gave in and was willing to go see a naturopath because I kind of knew. I had a friend that had gone through finding out she had wheat and dairy allergies. And praise the Lord she did, because she was able to have more children. Because when she cut out wheat and dairy, it cleared up her PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Right.
So when she discovered the food allergy thing for herself and cut out these foods, she was able to have 4 more children. So now she has 5 boys, which was a huge blessing. She wanted to have more children. She always wanted to have tons of children. So anyway, I knew there was something to the food allergy thing, but I didn't want to know
No, you don't
because
want
I
to know.
didn't want to
Yeah,
have to live that way.
I understand.
Yeah, I didn't want to have that much restriction on what I ate. I mean, that just sounded, I had 4 children, I was like, who has time to mess around with their diet like that? So anyway, I finally got sick enough, which is what I tell people that ask me about my restricted diet, because I eat a very restricted diet like you. And people ask me about it. Isn't that hard? Blah, blah, blah. And I always tell people, like, if you get sick enough, it's not hard.
No, there's your
Like,
incentive.
you remember being sick?
Yeah.
Yeah. You remember how sick you were. And it's just like, it's not even tempting, because it's just, why would I want to feel that way again if I don't have to?
Right.
So anyway, so that's how it's affected me. Is it took me a while to, I remember when I first went gluten-free and I was like, what do I even eat? I mean, I had no idea what to eat, but it didn't take too long. It was rough at first, but I was committed because I was tired of being sick. So I figured things out, like, I mean, eating corn tortillas was better than not eating anything at all. So it did get better though. And I mean, you and I have cooked together and things, like, you get really good at cooking gluten-free and you get to where you don't feel deprived at all. You get such a huge collection of recipes and things that you make, and you figure out where you can eat. And so, yeah, I've not had gluten since 2010.
Yeah.
At least not purposefully. I've been exposed to it a few times, unfortunately, on accident, but I'm generally very careful. I just don't, again, because even though it's been 15, 16 years, I still remember what it feels like if I eat gluten, and I just don't want to. So
please excuse this brief interruption for a shameless commercial. Remember, you can get your own copy of Iris's book, Never Alone, at irisfsmith.com.
Yeah. I'm hearing some of the similarities in what your story is like with mine. I mean, when I lived in Florida, I was probably in my 30s at the time. I was very sick. They thought that I had lupus. What they didn't realize is I had celiac, which was driving this other autoimmune disease called Sjogren's disease, which is in the lupus family. A lot of these autoimmune diseases, have similarities and they affect people differently. So you end up having somebody that has this autoimmune disease, somebody else will have this one. It really is so individual, and it affects people so differently. And so when I was in Florida, I can remember they didn't know what to do because I was so sick. And I was having all kinds of, like you described, the abdominal symptoms. And I didn't want to eat at times. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with me that I can't eat?
right, you should be able to eat.
Yeah.
Right.
And back then, again, it was not widely known. There just wasn't a lot known about it. I don't even think anybody ever even mentioned it. And so I remember being with a friend of mine, and she was around me a lot. And she said to me, have you ever realized that, you get sick every time you eat? And I said to her, yeah, but I don't know why. And so we had,
Or what to do about it.
right. So we had to live with
Yeah.
this mystery thing for many years until I came to Vermont when my son switched schools at the time. We moved to Vermont to be near him. I remember I saw, an old-fashioned, old-time doctor. And he said, I think I know what's wrong with you. And I said, what? And he said, I think you have celiac disease. And I said, well, what is that? And when he began to describe it, I was like, uh-oh, because at that time, there was nothing in the stores that was gluten-free. This is in the 90s, okay? There was nothing in restaurants. Nobody ever heard of it, so I could never go out to eat. I couldn't find any breads. I just literally lived on vegetables and protein and rice cakes for the longest time. And as time went on, like I said, I think I was a trendsetter when people started recognizing it and became more widely known. Well, then the restaurants started catching on. And, of course, things were showing up more and more in the grocery stores. And I was like, oh, thank God, I'm not alone in this. And then I could go out to eat again. And the other thing that's interesting that happens if you're strict enough in the beginning and you're really careful about what you're eating, what can happen over a period of time is your stomach will begin to heal. And that villi lining, because that's what gets damaged, is the villi lining that guides your food down. As you eat the gluten, when you don't know what it is, it's actually damaging the villi lining. And so when you're avoiding the gluten, that begins to heal over time. So now I can go to a restaurant, and if I get any kind of exposure, a cross-contamination thing, I don't react the way I did in the beginning. And I seem to be able to do it as long as it's gluten-free and wasn't baked with bread or something, And, but what a trip. And the thing is, people who have true celiac disease, it's a very dangerous disease. And, years ago, people did have it. They didn't know about it, and people just died from it. They didn't know what the heck it was. And a lot of people ended up with appendicitis out of nowhere. They attributed mine to being so extreme because I had celiac disease, But it's very, very dangerous. And, I would encourage our viewers, if there are people that have it, be very, very careful and pay attention to it because it does do damage if you don't pay attention to it. What happened with me, too, is this whole thing inspired me because, I came from an Italian bunch of people on one side and then Jewish Russian on the other, and it was all about food. So what I did was I developed a website, and I called it celiacdisease.tips. And if our viewers want to go there, you can go to celiacdisease.tips, where I share lots of recipes that I've converted into gluten-free. A lot of Italian recipes like lasagna, everything from hummus to, baked goods, breakfast ideas. In fact, I think I had you on there, Rachel, with me at one point. I've got some photos of you making some food with me. But if you go to celiacdisease.tips, and I would encourage you to get some recipe ideas. And I've got all kinds of information on there also about the disease, how it affects people, what to watch for in medications and things like that. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with doing that website for a while with the food and the cooking. Do you remember that? Do you remember being on there with me?
I do. I remember.
We met?
I'm trying to remember what we cooked that day.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I remember you fed me your grandmother's borscht, and it was the first time I had ever had that, and it was delicious. But I'm trying to remember. I feel like we had something else though. I can't remember if we did it a couple times because what was that?
Describe borscht for the viewers that don't know what that is. It's a Russian soup, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It's like a beef base, right? And then it has beef.
Yeah.
Which I love beef,
Yeah.
so that was right up my alley. And then you put sour cream on top.
Yeah.
Which was just like so good.
Yeah, it has beef
Yeah,
and
it was very yummy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's on the website too. Yeah, that recipe. Yeah, that was my grandmother's recipe. She made a really good borscht. And on the other side, my other one made a really good chicken cacciatore, which is also on the website, So, yeah, and so we are really blessed today because there's so much awareness. And now we don't have to feel like we have to hide in our houses eating rice cakes like we did in the very beginning. That was terrible.
Right.
We had this tradition.
I don't even know if I could eat a rice cake now.
Me either. Forget it. No.
When you first go gluten-free, you think that's all there is, and it's like you eat so many rice cakes.
I don't want to see another rice cake as long as I live. But the thing is, I used to have to sit and watch everybody else eat Chinese food. And I was like,
Yes.
I said to my son once, I said, I want this Chinese food on my deathbed. I don't care, I really miss Chinese food. Working in the Thai restaurants and the Chinese restaurants and all these restaurants caught on. I was like, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Same here. So happy when I found gluten-free Chinese food because I love Asian food. I mean, I'm from the West Coast, so of course, like we just have a ton of Asian food there.
Yeah.
So I've pretty much perfected my teriyaki, my gluten-free
Yeah.
teriyaki. Because one of the things that always surprises people about like keeping gluten out of your diet is that soy sauce
Mhm.
is not soy sauce. Soy sauce is actually made from wheat. And so if you want soy sauce that is actually only made from soy,
Yeah.
you have to get tamari sauce.
That's right. What
So
I
it's
do.
the labels are very misleading.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so hard to eat Asian food if you're gluten-free because you can't have the soy sauce that restaurants use. So it was very exciting when there was a few restaurants in our area that started using tamari sauce so that people who were gluten-free, like us, could actually have food. Yay!
Oh, it's just
Yeah.
one of those things that challenges you and challenges your faith, doesn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
because it's also, not only is it, limiting in some ways, but it's also time consuming. It consumes more time than you really have. You're trying to do other things. You're trying to live, and you got to think about cooking and what you're going to eat, And when
Yes, you definitely learn to plan ahead.
yeah, in the very beginning too, when I first told my son that I had celiac disease, he was still in early college. He was really a silly guy. And he said, I was trying to explain to him how strict I had to be when he would come home for a visit. And he goes to me, and he's very funny. Everything is a joke with him. He goes, Mom, how many times a day do you say the word celiac disease and you have to be gluten-free? And I said, way too many. And when
Right? Yeah.
and then another friend came in and he said, well, it would just be easier if we prepared the food so that, just like Iris would eat it, and we'll all eat it together. He said, it's not that limiting, take a gluten-free hot dog.
That's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had 4 kids and a husband. I was running a very busy household, all the soccer and ballet and band and choir and all the things. And I did not have the ability to make 2 separate meals at every meal. So my family ate gluten-free a lot. I didn't deprive them of if they wanted to order a pizza, of course, I was like, yes, order a pizza, because then I'll just eat whatever leftovers I can have or whatever. And that was fine. And then some places got gluten-free pizza, which was nice.
Yeah.
But for the most part, most things you can cook gluten-free without that much trouble. You can buy gluten-free bread, make a sandwich or whatever. So I would buy regular bread for my family because gluten-free bread's so expensive. And I had 4 teenagers at one point. We would literally go through a loaf of bread in one meal with everybody eating, but it wasn't too bad. But I will say this. My older daughter, loves to bake.
Yeah.
She loves to cook and she loves to bake. And I actually felt bad about this as a mom. The first time she made a pie crust with real wheat flour, her jaw hit the floor. And she was like, Mom, this pie crust was so easy to work with. She was like, I never knew pie crust could be so easy to bake, And I realized she had never made a pie with gluten crust, because I always had my gluten-free flour blend. I would mix up a big 5-gallon bucket of gluten-free flour. So I would put in all my different flours, and I got this blend that I really liked over the years. And I would use it for everything, like muffins and pizza crusts and biscuits and all the things that I never really got good at making gluten-free bread. I just bought that. But for everything else, I used my gluten-free flour blend. So she was so used to cooking with that that when she actually cooked with real flour, she was like, how could you have let me not have this experience my whole life? Baking can actually be easy. I was like, I'm sorry. couldn't have wheat flour in the kitchen, you know, like that was too much of a cross contaminant. So
It's like
we just didn't have
Rachel,
regular wheat flour.
it's like another form of child abuse.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was deprived. I had to bake with gluten-free flour my whole life.
I'm so sorry.
I know. I'm so sorry. You haven't had the real American experience, I guess, but
Yeah.
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 But the cool thing is she's amazing and she can make anything. Like she made me, I still to this day do not know how she did it. But one time, my daughter, who loves me so, so much, she found a recipe and she made gluten and dairy-free cream puffs, which doesn't even sound like it should be possible, but they were amazing. And I will always remember them and I will probably never have them again because she said they were just way too much trouble. Like they took her a really long time. But boy, did I enjoy every last bite of that. I can't even remember how she did it, but she made me gluten and dairy-free cream puffs that were so good.
That reminds me.
She's got skills.
Yeah. It teaches them skills. But anyway, yeah, my son came over one time when I first moved here, and he was really trying to give me something really nice. So he bought a pasta maker, and he made gluten-free pasta, and it took all day. And we hadn't even gotten to the point where we used to take the pasta and make it into lasagna. So we did this whole thing a whole day. He sat down and he goes, I feel like I just did a shift. You're like in a restaurant, you know? He goes, this is exhausting. But it came out really nice.
Yes, it is.
But, you know, in today's world, it's really hard to find the time to do that. And while it was wonderful, my goodness, it was a lot of work, you know? And I've got that, you know, on the Celiac Disease.tips website. We have pictures of him making, you know, the homemade pasta out of gluten-free flour. And, you know, it was wonderful. I mean, it was great.
It sounds delicious.
And you know something else, I wanted to mention this. It's so common in Italy, okay, that they have, it's called senza glutine. You know, it means without gluten. They have cookbooks and they have all kinds of, you know, restaurants and all kinds of awareness. And do you know that when children are 2 years old, they're commonly checked for celiac disease? That's how common it is in Italy. And so I was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. So if you go to Italy, they're very familiar with senza glutine, you know, making food without gluten, you know? They're very familiar with celiac disease. In fact, I have a cookbook that a friend of mine brought back to me from Italy. It's called Senza Glutine, and it's all in Italian, all gluten-free recipes. It's wonderful, you know? So
that's very neat.
Yeah.
You know what is all of this is making me think about how just like once your family and friends understand, I feel like if you can surround yourself with people or just kind of teach people around you, you know, how to work around it. And I know not everybody maybe has family that would be willing to do that. Like my mother-in-law tries, she's so sweet, you know, but like my in-laws and my parents tend to forget my allergies, you know, and they're like, what can you not have again? Like, I remember my stepdad, he's mentally challenged. So he's about 6th grade, you know, mental level. Very sweet though. Yeah. But I remember he was like, what's a gluten? You know, like when I told him I can't eat gluten anymore, he's like, what's a gluten? So people try, but I think the people that are closest to you will really get on board because they want you to be healthy. You know,
I was just going to say,
I think that's important to.
Yeah. I was just going to say to you, my family has it down to a science. Next week, my granddaughter's going to be 4 years old. We're in the month of March here during this segment. And when we had my grandson's birthday party last week, he turned 6. They made all these, you know, cupcakes that were all with wheat and gluten. And my granddaughter comes up to me and then it has a cupcake in a box, all wrapped. And she goes, here, Grandma, it's gluten-free. And she was telling everyone, she was telling all the other kids, my grandma has to be gluten-free. I mean, so my whole family has it down to a science. Whenever we have dinner together, it's so, you know, freeing because everybody understands. There isn't this, I have to constantly be explaining. And, they're more aware of it sometimes than I am. They're saying, should you be eating that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. So it is,
Yes.
if you have a
Yeah.
loving family, my husband, my son, my daughter-in-law, the grandchildren, they just all get it. And it's gotten into, friends and different things, so that when we get together with friends, they just make it all gluten-free. And there's so many products now, you wouldn't even notice the difference. Like,
Yeah.
if you have gluten-free pasta, we had a dinner at a friend's house last week, and she used gluten-free, breadcrumbs in the meatballs, and no problem, and gluten-free spaghetti,
Right.
and everybody loved it. They thought it was great. And then we had gluten-free bread that we used, and we made into, garlic bread. And everybody was like, I can't tell that this is gluten-free because we've come so far with it. But in the beginning, I would have sat there with a rice cake watching everyone. It was terrible. Yeah, I was like this, forgetting. I went,
Oh my
Rachel, I
gosh.
just wanted to end it all,
I know.
It was ridiculous.
This is no way to live. Like, I'm eating a rice cake with peanut butter and my family's having Chinese food, Yeah. It's rough at first. Yeah.
It's like, wait a
Yeah.
minute. Who
Yeah.
thought of this? This is not fair.
You're right.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. It's strange though, but I really was sick enough though. Even in that, I was thinking, but I'm not gonna eat that. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's strange that yes, you can kind of feel sorry for yourself sometimes. To be honest, I just had a conversation with a friend yesterday. Yeah, one of my prayer partners, and I was like, I think I might have to change this with my diet because I'm still always kind of messing with my diet to see if I can feel better. And she said, "Oh, so can I not make you those special cookies when you come next time?" And I was like, "I hope you can," you know. But anyway, so
know.
she was just praying for me, that I would still be able to find things that I can have that would not make me feel sick, And anyway, so sometimes you can have a little moment of feeling sorry for yourself,
A
but
little
for the
moment.
most part, I'm just grateful to feel well.
Rachel, I had
You
years
know?
of feeling like that, not just a moment.
Yeah,
Anyway, so,
yeah.
we're
Well,
ready.
that's right. You and I have called each other on
Oh,
our
yeah.
days like that, right? Like, yeah, we've definitely commiserated
Yeah.
on many occasions.
So anyway, to wrap up this session, because we're just about out of time, I want to thank the viewers for listening to us tonight. And we kind of hope and pray that you've gained something from this conversation we've had this evening. As we said, celiac disease has become so prevalent, and it's really when the true celiac disease is quite dangerous. If you have it, or if you've been diagnosed with it, or think you might have it, please pay attention to it. It's very important. Rachel, I want to thank you for being with me tonight. It's always a pleasure. And a reminder, if you do have celiac disease, to the viewers, and you want to go to our website, it's celiacdisease.tips. But if you want to know more about my book, which is, entitled Never Alone, it's about the importance of family and friendship and sticking together with God at the center. And, check that out. You can check that out at irisfsmith.com. And if you are gaining something from, our segments and you're enjoying them, please like and share them and comment. And we sure would appreciate that. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks again, Rachel, and we'll see you next time.
Wow, that was awesome, wasn't it?
I know those stories were really something.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time when we share more stories from Iris's book, Never Alone.
Order your copy of Never Alone at irisfsmith.com today.